we welcome a very distinguished academic from GITAM University, Professor Radha. I mean, she is a well-known figure in the academic field. And what more I can say that if you look at her resume, it is full of academic achievements as a researcher, as a professor, as a book writer, as an article writer, and various conferences in India and abroad she has addressed, and she had brought glory to herself and to the university and to the academic world in India. She is a known international economist and international business. All is her fault, and I think today we are fortunate to have her and address our participants. And now, without taking much time, I will request her to please address the participants. Now, over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for all those. Thank you so much, sir, and thank you for those kind words. And very good evening to all the participants.
You fully deserve that. You fully deserve that. I mean, it's not an exaggeration that I am saying.
Thank you, sir. And
please go on.
Thank you so much, and very good evening to all the participants from around India and also abroad. And this is going to be the design of my lecture. I'm going to address on economic diplomacy with respect to India and East Asian nations. So the design of my lecture, as you can see, initially we are going to start with what is economic diplomacy. And we are going to discuss about some important examples, some important India's achievements with respect to economic diplomacy. Then we are going to start in particular with India's Look East policy. The journey of India's Look East policy to the Act East policy has been a very great achievement with respect to economic diplomacy. So we are going to understand India's journey from Look East to Act East policy. And we are going to discuss about Regional Comprehensive Economic Cooperation, RCEP, which is very widely discussed. Because it has been some time now that our RCEP has been signed, and it is regarded as one of the largest FTAs of the world. So we are going to understand this with respect to economic diplomacy. And last few concluding remarks, then of course I'll open the discussion for your question and answers. So that is how we are going to have the design of this lecture. So with this, let us first start with what is economic diplomacy. So first let us understand what is diplomacy, then I'll take you to economic diplomacy. So diplomacy has been one of the important instruments of the foreign policy of a country and the global governance, because that is how you are going to present your great wider objectives of your country to the world. And at the same time, it is also going to guide the countries, the states' interaction with the rest of the world. And India's tradition of diplomacy dates back to the epic times. If you look at the great epics of our country, either Ramayana or Mahabharata, you can find the instances of how diplomacy has been taken. At the same time, we are looking at the modern diplomatic world. And this modern diplomatic world...
interrupt you, ma'am, your presentation is not visible.
Presentation is not visible. 1 minute.
It is visible.
Oh, I can see her. I can see her.
No,
presentation
isn't visible because Professor Gaur is sharing.
Not visible.
It's screen, sir.
Yeah.
So sir, if you
stop sharing your screen so that ma'am can.
It is visible to me. It's visible to me, and I have shared. That is what. Yeah, maybe sir can.
You guys can also do one thing. So there is this option now, view screens on the top of the the attendees. So वहाँ पे there is this option shared screen and वहाँ पे दो options है, Dr. Radha and Mahendra Gaur sir. So you can just click on Dr. Radha's and her screen will be visible to all of you.
Okay. Sir can do it from his end, or do I need to? Because I'm already sharing.
We need to do it from our end only.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe you can pin me. You can pin me.
Yes,
I think
we need to do it from our end only.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I like to go ahead because once we complete, we can have a good time for Q&A also. Okay. I'm going ahead, Amma. So I'm talking about what is diplomacy is. So it is largely used as a very important instrument with respect to foreign policy and global governance, because this is going to represent the country's broader objectives. At the same time, it is also going to shape the country's interactions with the outside world. And I was sharing that the presence of diplomacy, instances of diplomacy can also be found from the great epics of a country like Ramayana and Mahabharata, where we could see the instances of how diplomacy has been used. And the modern diplomatic methods, if you observe, they can be largely, they are derived from the 17th century European Union diplomatic practices that we see today. And all the international treaties agreements, if you open the paper, I think we can see the PTA agreements, the FTA agreements, the different trade agreements, or different technology transfer agreements, or the international relations, or we hear about alliances. So all these are the result of the diplomatic negotiations and the processes. And diplomats, they also help, they also advise the government about the foreign policy, and they also advise at different instances. So that is how diplomacy has been playing a very important role in shaping a country in the global, in the geopolitical environment. Now with diplomacy, let us talk about economic diplomacy. So when we talk about diplomacy, as you yourself can see from the syllabus, we were talking about economic diplomacy, cultural diplomacy, media diplomacy, political diplomacy, commercial diplomacy, financial diplomacy. So there are variety of areas how diplomacy can be understood and how diplomacy can be taken for. So today I'm going to talk about economic diplomacy, since this is my area. So economic diplomacy, it is the use of government resources overall to promote the volumes of the country's trade, or to see that the economy's growth rate is achieved. At the same time, promoting the country's investment and attracting foreign direct investment. At the same time, different collaborations that the country would like to have with respect to either bilateral level or at the multilateral level. So economic diplomacy largely used as a resources of the government to shape the economy of a country. Largely, that is the objective of economic diplomacy. To see that the country achieve its economic objectives is what economic diplomacy is all about. So it also is the use of to promote foreign policy objectives. As you know, every 4 years, country is going to adopt one foreign policy, and this foreign policy is altered every year. So economic diplomacy also helps, and economic diplomacy also is the use and promote countries' foreign policy objectives to be achieved. So most commonly, how economic diplomacy is pronounced? How do countries use economic diplomacy? Largely, countries take the help of either in the form of aid, in the form of support, in the form of economic sanctions that you give to other countries. That is how economic diplomacy is generally pronounced. Okay, the larger aim of economic diplomacy is to see that countries' growth rate is obtained. At the same time, promote countries' foreign trade policy objectives. So every country has its own foreign trade policy objectives. As I said, every 4 years, one foreign trade policy we are going to adopt. India is adopting. Okay, and every year it is altered depending upon the needs of the country, depending upon the situations. So today, if you observe, the current trend is lot of agreements, trade agreements, lot of bilateral agreements, a lot of alliances, or lot of negotiations are taking place. So here I have used two terminologies. I think World Trade Organization negotiations I have used, I think most of you as a students of international relations or international business, you know about World Trade Organization. So there are different negotiations that are taken up at World Trade Organizations. And every year, different issues are also taken into the dispute settlement body of WTO. Or for example, recently, we have seen a tariff war. The tariff war, just before 2 years, just before 1.5 years or so, we have seen the tariff war between US and China. Of course, with India also, because the tariffs that were raised, that are raised on especially steel and iron with respect to the commodities that are exported from China and also in India by United States of America. So we have seen a tariff war between US and China. So such kind of negotiations also are under economic diplomacy. As you know, World Trade Organization is an international apex body. Okay, the objective of WTO is to have free and fair international trade, promote free and fair international trade among the member countries. So there are different negotiations that take place with respect to tariffs. WTO is against tariff. WTO is for free international trade. But every country has given some time period depending upon its category, whether it is high income group country or middle income group country. So here, World Trade Organization, different negotiations do take place on what is a bound tariff, what is a tariff that our countries have bounded at WTO, and what is the effective tariff. So all such negotiations come under economic diplomacy. So different issues like double taxation or other issues that you would like to take, country having sanctions against import from other country. So all these issues also come under economic diplomacy. So this is what the economic diplomacy deals about. So with economic diplomacy, here I have mentioned what all can be categorized under economic diplomacy. Here I have talked about free trade agreements, FTAs means. PTA are preferential trading arrangement. As you know, when countries do form regional economic groupings, there are 5 different stages. The first stage is the PTA, preferential trading agreement. So then we have an FTA. Under PTA, you can take the example of SAFTA, South Asian Preferential Trading Arrangement. Unfortunately, it could not be turned out into a FTA, SAFTA. Okay, then we have an FTA. India has an FTA with more than 50 countries. With more than 20 countries, already the FTA is in progress, and under 20 or so countries, FTAs are under negotiations. With ASEAN, what I'm going to discuss now, we do have an FTA. So FTA is at the second stage. Okay, when countries form a regional grouping, 5 different stages are there. The PTA, the FTA, the customs union, the common market, and final stage is economic union, like European Union. Then, as I was mentioning, WTO multilateral trade issues, as I was mentioning about the tariff war. Similarly, at a point of time, there was a ban against import of carpets from India. So this has been negotiated. At one point of time, on shrimp imports from countries like Malaysia and India, the Western countries have given a sanction against the import of shrimp imports from India, Malaysia, and other Asian countries. So even such issues were discussed under economic diplomacy to sort out the issues. Similarly, the foreign direct investment promotion activities. Similarly, the trade promotion that you take place through different chambers. And similarly, the issues with respect to the World Bank, IMF, or UNCTAD. Recently, we have seen from 2015 onwards, we have seen the emergence of the BRICS Development Bank, later on converted into New Development Bank, or the One Belt, One Road initiative, which is promoted by China. So all these are under the economic diplomacy. Similarly, technology transfers. India has a technology transfer from Russia. So all such kind of technology transfer agreements or tourism promotion activity. India and ASEAN, we have a joint tourism promotion council. So such kind of tourism promotion activities. Similarly, different joint and business councils. Like with ASEAN too, we have a ASEAN Business Council meet, and different other areas also we do have different council meets. So all these do come under economic diplomacy. Then now, with this, we'll take up some examples of how India has been using economic diplomacy. So India has engaged in economic diplomacy largely through different kind of trade activities and support activities that it has been giving it to its neighboring countries. Like here you can see on screen a trade aid and trade support that India has extended to Bangladesh. Currently, if you observe the economy of Bangladesh is not in a very good well shape. But India as a neighboring country, during the past period and during the current period also, India has been giving a supporting hand to countries like Bangladesh, especially to all the SAARC countries, African countries. We have been a great sort of support. So you can see India has extended a soft loan towards Bangladesh, and at the same time, it also has given a 200 million aid to Bangladesh. Okay, under soft loan, the loan which is given to a partner country where there is no interest charge or interest rate is very minimal. It is very below the market rate of interest. So such kind of support that country has been extended is a part and parcel of economic diplomacy. Today, what you are observing is largely the economic diplomacy includes the exchange and trade agreements that you sign with respect to procurement of different construction projects or different negotiations that country has taken with respect to food security or, for example, oil security. Largely, they are revolving around these. So all such kind of negotiations with respect to procurement, purchase, and exchange come and they fall with under the basket of economic diplomacy. So here I've given some massive achievements of our country with respect to economic diplomacy. As I said, India has been a great support to the African countries and the neighbors of SAARC and ASEAN countries. So India has been extremely generous and it has been supporting with respect to credit to many African countries and of course Bangladesh and also other developing ASEAN countries. And similarly here also have mentioned about India through its CLMV strategy. CLMV strategy is Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam strategy. So this strategy has been followed in order to accelerate and intensify its trade relations with ASEAN countries. And Export-Import Bank of India, as you all know, it is in Mumbai. It was playing a very, very large and great role with respect to such kind of support that India can extend to these countries. So India has been largely allocated 400 crores corpus largely to create these manufacturing hubs towards the Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar and Vietnam through its CLMV strategy to intensify its trade relations with ASEAN. Similarly, I have also mentioned, I think, one example you can see of China. So 2019, we have seen, of course, at that particular period of time, we were having standoff with China. So one side we were having standoff with China and other side we had a very, very important meeting of our Honorable PM with the Chinese counterpart, where they have signed a very, very important agreement with respect to economic and trade dialogue. So this has been very, very crucial. So this also comes as a part of economic diplomacy. So you can observe that all this economic diplomacy is to see that the economy is performing, to see that the economy is growing, to see that the volume of trade relations with the other countries are on rise. So economic diplomacy plays a very, very crucial role in shaping your economy. At the same time, to see that your economic objectives are achieved. So with this, I would also like to mention some more examples where you can see during the COVID situation also, there has been a very, very important role that economic diplomacy has played. So before that, I would talk on currency swapping. So as you know, India has a currency swapping arrangement with the other SAARC countries. So recently, as we were also talking about Sri Lanka, so Sri Lankan economy also had a currency swap deal with India. And this currency swap deal is also part and parcel of economic diplomacy. So when a currency swap deal, generally such kind of currency swap deals are signed in order to see that the country's economy is uplifted. So countries sign on these currency swap deals when they are having a serious balance of payment deficiency situations. Such kind of currency swap deals are signed in order to see that the economy is on track and economy keeps moving. So this recent currency swap deal with Sri Lanka, of course, the latest information is that Sri Lanka has completely repaid the amount that it has taken through currency swap deal. And such currency swap deal Sri Lanka also had with respect to Bangladesh. So currency swappings are also part and parcel of economic diplomacy. And here, a most important economic diplomacy that country was very, very successful in, and currencies and countries' important achievement, I would say, is India's vaccine diplomacy. So we all have seen that during COVID situation, how our country has extended a helping hand, not only to neighboring countries, but to the whole world. So 133 countries, our country has extended a helping hand. So just before the COVID situation, India has already become a pharmacy to the whole world. You can see 20% of the global pharmaceutical production is from our country. And India is meeting 62% of the global demand for vaccines. So during the COVID outbreak time period, we have seen that many countries were pleading India with respect to medicine, especially hydroxychloroquine and paracetamol. So countries were pleading that. Even we have seen that United States of America also have asked for a helping hand with respect to supply of these medicines. And country has been quite successful in helping, and it has given a helping hand to the world, I will say, during the COVID time period. It has supported to all the countries with vaccines, with testing toolkits, and all the necessary equipment that the world has required at that particular point of time. And it is a very important and very, very great achievement of our country. And it is popularly called as vaccine diplomacy. And this vaccine diplomacy supporting the other countries with respect to pharmaceuticals is an India's achievement with respect to its economic diplomacy. And India's prestige and India has become a friend to the whole world, I'd say, after this vaccine diplomacy. And other important point I would like to mention is during the COVID situation, when the world has come to know that there is an outbreak of COVID. So very important move that has been taken by our Honorable Prime Minister, by India. So what is this important move? When the first wave of COVID has struck the world, immediately Honorable PM has called out for a meeting of all SAARC countries leaders. And all the SAARC countries leaders, along with Pakistan, have attended this particular video conference. And in this particular video conference, our country has taken this initiative, and it has announced a COVID fighting fund with $10 million. Okay, contributing $10 million, India has started a COVID fighting fund for all the SAARC countries, which is a very, very important move, and we should discuss in the economic diplomacy. And why this $10 million fund is the contribution from our country, of course, and all the SAARC countries have agreed to that. And every country, depending upon its capacity, has contributed to this COVID fighting fund. And this COVID fighting fund is for the upliftment of the country, is for the people, is to fight against COVID. Okay, it is a very, very important economic diplomatic move that we should say that our country have taken up this initiative, and it is welcomed by the whole world and also all the SAARC countries. So I think all these are an exemplary examples of how India has taken economic diplomacy forward. And here I would like to discuss about some of the general hurdles in the way of economic diplomacy. So what are the general hurdles in the way that when you're taking up an economic diplomacy forward that can come before you? So here I would like to say new mercantilist ideologies. I think some of you have heard about mercantilism, the first doctrine in international trade we'll be teaching to the students. So this mercantilist ideology is only encourage exports, but do not encourage imports. That is the mercantilist ideology, which was there long back during the 17th century. The idea is encourage only exports, because when you export, you are going to earn foreign currency. Even now, that is the same. Okay, but at that time, the medium of exchange is gold and silver. So mercantilists used to think that when you sell your commodities in the international market, you're going to earn gold and silver. There is going to be inflow of gold and silver into our country. And when you import, you need to pay opposite. You need to pay to the other country. So this is the mercantilist ideology. Then why we are discussing this new mercantilist ideology and saying this is one of the hurdles in the way of economic diplomacy. See, 2008, most of you know, world has experienced United States of America's subprime crisis, which started in the real estate sector of America, crept to the whole world. Fortunately, countries like India, we do have huge domestic demand. When we do have huge domestic demand, and we were not so hurted like other countries during 2008 world economic crisis. So after 2008 world economic crisis, most of the world countries, whether it is European Union nations, whether it is America, or whether it is Canada, New Zealand, so whether it is African countries, most of the countries have adopted such kind of ideology that you become only the exporter and you keep a restriction on your imports, try to reduce your import, but you only try to encourage the exports. So countries were taking different norms. Countries were adopting different norms in order to see that they encourage only export and they discourage their imports. The reason is every economy wanted to make its economy foolproof. Every country wanted to make its economy foolproof so that you have huge forex reserves. You export, increase your forex reserves. Why? Because you need to safeguard your economy. When another crisis comes, you need to safeguard your economy. So this has been the ideology after 2008. So I'm saying this is a hurdle in a way of economic diplomacy. So when all the countries restrict their imports, only export, so who is going to be the importer? So such kind of new mercantilist ideologies are a hurdle to the economic diplomacy and growing protectionism. Each country would like to protect its domestic industries. Each country is going to protect its domestic industry, and each country is going to protect its exports. So such kind of growing protectionism, new mercantilist ideology, which you can see post 2008 economic crisis. And this has increased the momentum, especially after the COVID situation. Okay, and I think many times you have heard post-COVID, what was the slogan? They are saying that post-COVID, more of the government and less of the market. And they are saying from globalization, there has been a complete turn off to homecoming. So this has been, I think I'll say, new mercantilist ideology has been accelerated post-COVID situation. So everyone were talking about like it's a back homecoming, or it is more of the government and less of the market. And I think you know about tariff and non-tariff barriers and how they are going to restrict the economic diplomacy taking forward. Similarly, import licenses, export controls, or for example, the quota system where there is a limitation on volumes, or subsidies, export restraints, and the local content requirements. So all these are some of the hurdles that you can have in terms of, you can see they are coming before the economic diplomacy, and they are the hurdles for taking the economic diplomacy forward. So with this, let us state, so major shift in India's economic diplomacy. When did it start and how did it start? So after this, we'll slowly move